and I'm going to be talking about natural remedies today. Yesterday I quoted a book, The Ministry of Healing, one of my first and still one of my favourite health books by a lady author named Ellen White. And she said in page 127 of this book, and the chapter is The Physician and Educator, she said, in case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained, wrong habits corrected, unhealthful conditions changed, that's common sense, isn't it? Then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system. And this is what natural remedies are all about. Natural remedies are different things, sometimes made from vegetables, sometimes herbs, sometimes water therapies, that assist the body in its ability to heal. The human body was designed to heal itself, and it will heal itself, little tiny two-letter word there, if you give it the right conditions. And so the other three-letter word, well, why are so many people sick? If the body can heal itself. Well, there's a few things to take note here. The body will heal itself if you give it the right conditions, and not everyone knows those conditions. And this is what these presentations are all about, is teaching you the conditions to bring about healing. You might know them all, you might know some, you might not know many. When I was a little girl and I got sick, I was taken to the doctor and he gave me cherry-flavoured fluid to drink. I realise now it was an antibiotic mix because I had a cough. Well, something interesting, I was reading a research, 100 people all got the flu, 50 took antibiotics, 50 didn't, and they all got better. In fact, I get mothers ringing me saying, my baby's sick, my baby's got a fever, my baby's got a bad cough. And the first thing I say to them is, remember this, the babies all over the world have had this. And also remember this, if you do nothing, the baby will heal. But if you do a few things that I advise, it will speed up the healing process. So we've done our two-letter word. We've got our three-letter word. There's a four-letter word too, and I'm going to put it right in the middle. And this is something most people don't give the body. Time. Isn't that right? And the reason why we don't give it time is because we want to be better now. Is that right? We want to be better right now. But give the body a little bit of time. An illustration I often give people is, this took 20 years to establish itself in your body, but the good news is it won't take 20 years to undo. But it might take 1 or 2. So it's time. So I'm going to give you a couple of Bible verses that will help to understand this. And one is found in Galatians 6 verse 9, it says, let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap if we faint not. Another verse is found in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 35. It says, cast not away therefore thy confidence, in the which is great recompense of reward, for ye have need of patience, in that after you have done the will of God, you might receive the promise. And what's his promise? We find his promise in 3 John chapter 1 verse 2. Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospers. So what's God's desire? What's his promise for us? That we be in health. And certainly that's our desire for that as well. So I just wanted to establish a few things that the body can heal itself when you give it the right conditions. And sometimes it's not healing because we haven't given it the right conditions. And sometimes we've given it the right conditions and we just need to be patient. Is that right? We just need to be patient because we will heal. So let's begin by looking at something like a cold. Because do you know there's lots of different strains? And we know that is really not much different to a cold or a flu. And it's always been 99% people have always recovered from any flu. But there are things that you can do to speed up the process. And something that will really speed up the process, and this one might surprise you, it's a fever. Fever is nothing to fear. I'm going to give you a couple more F letters here. So there's children here today. We're getting a good bit of schoolwork here today. So one word is fear. There is no need to fear a fever, because who created the fever? The same one that created the body, which is God. And he created it for a fever. He created it for a purpose. The other F word is faith. And that's why in we've done Galatians, we're going to Hebrews chapter 10, verse 35. Cast not away therefore thy confidence. In other words, cast not away therefore thy faith. Cast not away therefore for thy confidence, in the which is great recompense of reward. There's great recompense of reward when you have faith in this amazing body that God created to heal itself. Remember? We need a little bit of patience there. Fever is nothing to fear. It is a process. And looking at the anatomy and physiology of the body, when the temperature of the human body rises, healing rises, circulation rises, the ability to make more red and white blood cells in the bone marrow, because that's where they're made, it rises. So fever gives a huge boost to the immune system. And tomorrow we're going to be looking at the immune system, and we're going to have a look at how we're going to be looking at fever again there. So these are some things to remember with fever, but we're going to put here no need. No need to fear. With fear written there, we need to put that. Remember what God said in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7? He said, I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. And a sound mind considers the things that I'm telling you. Remember this. Here's another F word. This is the F day. Fever is your friend. So why is fever your friend? Because fever not only gives a powerful boost to the healing of the body, not only does it boost your internal immune system, your army, your bone marrow to make more red and white blood cells, but also the heat of the fever can kill any harmful pathogens or bacteria or viruses or yeast and fungus in the body. When I was a nurse and someone got a fever, the first thing we wanted to do was get that fever down. But that makes no sense, because it has a purpose. Now, if the person's feeling terribly uncomfortable, you can do things to just get that temperature down a little bit. That's all I used to do when my babies or my children had fevers. I would do these things just to get the temperature down a bit, to make them a little more comfortable. So remember the next one. Water puts the fire out. So how do we use water? You can use water internally. There's only one part of the body that doesn't like getting really hot, and that is the brain. And if you drink adequate water, that will prevent the brain temperature going too high. So what can you do to ensure that the person's getting adequate water? There was no problem when I had breastfed babies, because when they're sick, they want to nurse more. They're getting lots of fluid. So I used to let them nurse a little more than usual when my babies had a fever, because I knew that that would keep them well hydrated. If the baby's bottle fed, some very good fluids you can give to the baby is coconut water, because coconut water is very high in minerals, and when a person has a fever, they're perspiring a lot, which means they're losing a little bit more of their minerals. And it's slightly sweet, so usually the little one really likes it. So coconut water. And Or sucking on ice. Sucking on ice, obviously a baby can't do that, but little toddlers, children, sucking on ice can help. If they're finding just plain water hard, you could put a little lemon in there. You could make, say, peppermint tea or lemongrass tea, but you just got to find some way to get it in. But I would never give them a sugar drink because sugar dehydrates. Even honey can dehydrate a little bit, so ideally not sweeteners. But if the little one or the person cannot drink, maybe they're vomiting too, then the easiest way is to give them an enema. Just a warm water enema, and that will hydrate the body like that. In fact, you can get 1.5 cups of water in the colon in minutes, and even in hospital with a drip in the arm, it won't take 1.5 minutes to get 1.5 cups of water in. And it's a very distressing thing to have a drip put in, so if you can handle it at home, it's so much easier. If someone's very dehydrated and you don't have an enema kit, or the person is very resistant to that, you can put them in a bath. Now when you put them in a bath, it's not hot water, it's not cold water, it's tepid water. That's body temperature. And if the person's very dehydrated, the skin will absorb the water. And also, the tepid bath will bring the temperature down a bit. Because if the water in the bath is cooler than the water in the body, then the water will draw the heat out of the body. So that's not only a good way to help to hydrate the body, it's also an excellent way to bring the temperature down a little bit. Believe it or not, when a person has a fever, often their feet are cold. So putting their feet in warm water, and then as the feet warm up, put a little bit more hot in so that the water becomes hot. When you heat the feet, often the heat of the body is drawn down to the feet. Often a hot foot bath and cool on the head will be enough to just bring that temperature down a little bit. Another way that you can bring the temperature down, and this can be good for a little one, excuse me, maybe a little toddler, a small child. You take their clothes off except for perhaps just their underpants and lay them on a towel and then put another towel on top. And then you have a bowl of not hot water, not cold water, just warm water. And you have a washer, you call it a face cloth, and you don't wring it out tight so it's still got a bit of water. You take the arm out and you sponge that arm. And that water, the droplets of water on the arm, will draw heat out of the body. Then you dry it and then put it under the towel. And then you get the other arm and you do that. And then you get the leg and do that. And then the other leg. And then the torso. And then you turn the body over and you do the whole of the back as well. Just bit by bit. You don't want to expose the whole body. You don't want to wet the whole body. The air will, and they can chill. You don't want that. You just do one piece of the body at the time. That might take 10 minutes to go through the whole body, but by the end, the temperature has usually come down a bit. But the most powerful way to get the temperature down, and this is a little bit more work, so I'm leaving this one to last, and it's a wet sheet pack. Now to do this, you get a bed, and you put, say, a shower curtain or a big sheet of plastic over the bed, and then you put a woolen blanket. It cannot be any other fibre but wool, because wool is the only thing that will prevent the moisture going through. Definitely not those microfibre blankets, they will not do it. It must be wool. So you put the woolen blanket over, and then you get a sheet, and you wet the sheet, and you wring it out tight, and then you lay the wet sheet over the blanket, and the person lays on it, usually just with a pair of underpants on, and they put their arms up in the air, and one side of the wet sheet goes around their torso and between the legs. Put the legs together, arms down. You've got to do it quickly because it's not very comfortable because it's a wet sheet. And then the other side goes over the whole torso. Then you quickly wrap them up in the blanket. It's very uncomfortable. It's not nice lying on a wet sheet. And even if you make the sheet hot, by the time you've laid it out, the air will cool it. So it'll be cold. As soon as the blanket goes on the body's heat warms up the sheet. So even though it's very uncomfortable, it's very important to explain to the person what you're going to do to them before you do it, and explain how it will be uncomfortable, but we're going to do it very, very quickly. And what happens is that cold, wet sheet pulls the heat out of the body. It's the most powerful way to get a temperature down. And if you put your hand down in that sheet within 10 minutes, that sheet is hot. And it was cold. Where's the heat come from? It's been pulled out of the body. And one of the problems with a fever is often the body can't get that heat away. So all the things that I just explained helped to get the heat out of the body. Yes, we do want a fever, but we want to bring it down so that the person's comfortable. So remember, water puts the fire out internally and externally. The third thing to remember is when all the, we use the word rubbish, but I'll use trash because that's the word you're common with. So when all the trash is burnt up, the fire goes out. So when the trash is burnt up, fire gone. The fever will go when it's done its job. I had a man ring me up. He's got a little 5-month-old baby. Unfortunately, the baby had a high fever, and the doctor told them to give this little drug. They're in Albania. And the little drug, I know in Australia they give Panadol. I'm not sure what they give here, but there's a Tylenol, is it, to get the temperature down. He said it gets the temperature down, but then within a few hours it just comes up again. So what have they got to do then? Give it another drug. You see, that temperature's trying to do its work. So every time a drug is put in, it has to wait for the drug to wear off, and then it comes back to do its work. You've got to let it do its work. So I wrote back to him and I said, I appreciate what you've been told, but I never gave my baby any drugs. And I'm so pleased that I can say this. And I could do that because I knew what I'm teaching you today. What I would do if my baby had a fever, if they were comfortable and just sleeping, I'd just let them lie. And again, because they were breastfed, they had a lot of feeds, so they're getting a lot of water. But if they were starting to get uncomfortable and I never took their temperature, I just could feel. You could just feel with your hand up in here, ooh, they're quite hot, so we'll do something. And my daughter told me that her little 18-month had a fever and did not want to go in the bath, did not want to go from mother. So she did what she knew that baby would not like. She got a little woolly shawl, she got a wet sheet, she wrung it out, she quickly put the baby, and the baby did not like being wrapped up in that wet sheet, but she did it very quickly and then wrapped him in a woolly blanket and held the baby tight. Then the baby was very happy. She said, I loved the wet sheet, even though the baby didn't like it at first. The baby wanted to be held, as they do want to be held when they're sick. So she said, I was able to cuddle and cuddle and cuddle that baby because he was all wrapped up in the wet sheet. And that brought the temperature down a little bit. So this is things to remember when a fever happens. I have a lot of, especially first-time mum and dads ringing me alarmed, and I say, babies all over the world have had this. Now, what people fear with the fever is that the child or the baby will convulse, yeah? If the baby's well hydrated, it's very rare. And no baby has ever got brain damage from convulsing with a fever. If you remember those things, then you will not fear so much the fever. So that's to remember. There are things that you can do with a fever. So what I want to look at now is I'd like to go more over to poultices. And what we're looking at is the cold, the flus. You're going into winter, and so everyone seems to get a few more colds and flus in winters. Why is that? I believe it's because people start breathing in too much cooked air. Too much cooked air. Now we're warm-blooded creatures, so we need to be kept warm, so make sure you've got nice warm bedding. I always have a hot shower just before I go to bed. No, I don't have a cold shower after the hot when I'm going to go to bed, because I don't want to be woken up. I just want to be relaxed. And tomorrow when we look at the immune system, we'll have a look at the hot and colds. I have a hot shower, and I put some woolly socks and my slipper inside shoes on, and then I jump straight into bed. At the moment, I've got a nice feather quilt and a woolen blanket, and I stay warm all night. So it's important to be warm, but it's important to breathe in fresh air. People get winter colds and flus because they breathe in too much cooked air. They eat too much cooked food. I aim for 50% raw and 50% cooked when I'm eating. But isn't salad hard in the cold weather? Well, you can heat up your salad with cayenne pepper and crushed garlic. That will warm up your salad. And most people will have a hot shower, be in the hot room with the cooked air and the cooked breakfast, and go out into that cold, cold air. And often that reaction can bring about a cold. So to prepare yourself for going outside, you have your cold shower after you're hot in the morning, just briefly, and that will prepare you. So what can you do if you get a cold? There are a few things you can do, and we're going to begin with the onion. And we're going to begin with the raw onion. Have you ever chopped up an onion and you start crying? That tells you very clearly that the properties of that onion juice, they break up and clear the mucus. And so this is what you can do for a sore throat. You get I had 8 children, and when you've got 8 children, you get sheets getting thin. When the sheets get thin, that's the time to start tearing them or cutting them into squares like this. It's a good idea to have a poultice box at home, and get a poultice box, give it a little label, and you'll have lots of thin cotton about that size, because that's the perfect to make poultices out of. Now we're going to make one for a sore throat, and you finely slice onion. So you'd only want probably about 6 slices of onion like this. And then you fold this over and you fold that over. So now you've got a package that's about that big. And one side will have several layers of cloth, and the other side will have one layer of cloth. So where you see one layer of cloth, you put that around the throat. And it's not long. In fact, by the time you've cut it and made it, you'll see the onion juice coming out. And the skin absorbs that onion juice. And that onion juice will help to bring relief to a sore throat. Then you might cover it with a little plastic and then a scarf and tie it on. And you can sleep with that overnight. And that will bring relief to a sore throat. Because it's fresh vegetable matter, you always discard it after use. Now you might be surprised what we're going to do with the onion now. So we'll get our sheet, remember the thin cotton. If you don't have any old sheets, you can go to a thrift shop and get a thin looking sheet and maybe tear that up, or you could always go to somewhere like Joann's and get some just fine cotton. I always like to use cotton, natural fibre. Even muslin or lawn, some fine cotton, and have squares about this size. So we're going to chop up one onion into little squares. So we're going to put the little bits of onion on the cloth. Now maybe we're going to do this for maybe a 10-year-old child. And the reason we're doing it is because they've got a bad cough and they're coughing. And you'll do this overnight. So that's about the size, maybe a little bit more, of a 10-year-old foot. And you put the foot straight on to the little pieces of onion. And then you wrap the cloth over the foot and put a plastic bag on it. And with the plastic bag, you twist it around so it's fitted, and then you put a sock on, and the sock holds it all together. And then they go to bed with one on each foot, half an onion in each little bag. And they will not cough all night long. Can I say that with confidence? I've seen it so many times. My daughter's little boy, he was 3 at the time, and he was coughing and coughing and coughing, and she gave him a hot bath, wrapped him up and put him to bed, and he kept coughing and he kept coughing. And after half an hour, we thought he'd go to sleep, still coughing. So we got him up, we made 2 onion bags, put them on his feet, put the socks on, which held it all nice and tight, put him back to bed, not one more cough. In fact, he did not cough for the whole night. It's almost unbelievable, isn't it, that it is that dramatic. A friend of mine was camping by the beach, and the lady in the tent, a little bit down for her, coughed all night. She was just coughing all night, kept half the people in the camp area awake. That afternoon, my friend went up to the lady and said, "Excuse me, I hope you don't mind me approaching you. I notice you've got a bit of a cough." And the lady said, "I'm so sorry, I think I'm waking everyone up, I don't know what to do." And my friend said, "Can I give you some advice?" She said, "Make up 2 onion bags, put your feet in them, put your foot on the onion, put a sock on to hold it tight. No cough the whole night." Not one cough. So the next day that lady came running looking my friend, and she said, "I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it that I did not cough all night." She said, "My husband didn't like my perfume that night." But there were no complaints because he got a good night's sleep. In the morning, you discard the onion. The onion is a drawer. And I think we realise that, because an old remedy, if you've just painted a room, is to slice an onion and put it in the room and it'll absorb the onion fumes. I know my husband bought me a new fridge about 1.5 years ago, and I did not like the smell of my new fridge. It smelled plastic chemically. So I sliced up an onion on 2 plates. One plate went in the fridge, the other plate went in the freezer. I left it there all night, and in the morning when I opened my fridge, it smelt a little onion, but not too bad, but the chemical plastic smell was gone. You can also do it in a new car. I know if we've had a new car, I say to Michael, put the windows down. He reckons he likes the smell, but my husband loves cars. But a lot of people are familiar with that onion will draw in any bad fumes. So make sure if you're only going to use half an onion, you don't wrap the other half in plastic, because that onion will absorb all the chemicals from the plastic. So what I do, if I've got a big onion and I only want to use half, so I'm going to use half for breakfast and half for lunch, I'll keep the skin on it, I'll cut it in half, and I'll put it on a china plate, and I'll put a cup on top of that. And then I can use it the next meal, or I can put it in the fridge and use it the next day, but I would not keep it any longer than that, because it's a drawer. So it has a few properties. You can also use the onion to make a cough syrup. So to make a cough syrup, we get a jar. So here's our jar. And in that jar, you put a layer of chopped onion. So here's the chopped onion. So that would be about 1/2 inch layer. And then you'll put a heaped teaspoon of honey. And then you put another layer. You could use maple syrup, whatever's cheaper. And then you put another teaspoon of honey. We always use honey. Honey can be nice and soothing too on a sore throat. And then you put another layer of chopped onion, then another teaspoon of honey, and another layer of chopped onion. And you do this until your jar is full. And there's another layer. I have made it when my honey is crystallized and hard in the winter, and it'll still make a very nice onion syrup. So after 24 hours, what you'll find is you'll find the onion like this, and then you'll find a liquid. And that liquid is a light amber colour, but it's almost as runny as water. So there's your onion syrup. And you strain out the onion. And when you strain out the onion, if you have a jar this big, you're usually left with maybe about a third of a jar of onion syrup. It's very concentrated. So what's the dose? For an adult, it might be a teaspoon 3 times a day. Maybe for you could even have a 10-year-old, a teaspoon 3 times a day. Maybe for a little 4-year-old, maybe half a teaspoon 3 times a day. For a little baby, you might just give a few drops 3 times a day. That's a very old remedy, is the onion cough mixture. Sky's the limit. You could put garlic in there, you could put ginger in there. But the honey is a preservative. So there's your onion syrup. So there are a few things you can do with the the raw onion. I'd like to now look at the cooked onion. Now the cooked onion isn't quite used for coughs and colds. We're going to look at a few things, more things for that in a minute. But the coughs and the colds, the raw onion specifically, but the cooked onion can be used for a few things, and it's when it's cooked it seems to increase its drawing power. And it's the first poultice that I ever did at the age of, I think I was 26 or 27, on my second son, my second child. He had an earache, and I'd had a very, what I called a difficult experience with my first daughter. She got an earache at 16 months, and everyone said, don't play with the ears, she'll go deaf. So I immediately took her to the doctor, and he put her on antibiotics. I didn't really want to do that, but I didn't know what else to do. And when she'd finished the antibiotics, the earache came back. So 4 earaches, 4 courses of antibiotics, and 6 weeks later, I am so frustrated. So I went back to the doctor. I didn't know what else to do. My parents, they didn't know what else to do, because they were brought up in the era of you go to the doctor and have drugs. See, the generation that didn't use drugs, which would be my grandmother, who died at the age of 99 about 25 years ago, they knew some of the natural remedies. See, they're not around anymore. So I said to the doctor, will my daughter be on antibiotics for the rest of her life? I'm starting to come to that conclusion. And just as he's about to write the 5th course of antibiotics, he said, I'll give you a referral to an ear, nose and throat specialist. And of course that's all it costs. We went to the ear, nose and throat specialist, and he looked in Emma's ears. He looked in her mouth. He said, the child's teething. Give her these drops and it'll just keep the eustachian tubes clear. And that was it. No more earaches. And so 2 years later, when my second child, first son, 16 months, he got an earache. I did not tell anyone, because if you tell people, then you get pressure. You've got to go to the doctor, you can't leave this, they'll go deaf. There's that word fear. It's important not to do anything because of fear. It's important to have the sound mind and assess these things. This is what God wants us to have, is faith. But remember where it says God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love and a sound mind. A sound mind assesses the situation and makes a reasonable decision. When you make decisions on fear, it's not always the best decision. I didn't want my children to go deaf, and I wanted to do something, and I wanted to relieve them. So what I did, remember I was 20, I think I was 27, I went to the old lady next door. She's 85. See, she was still from that era. I said, what did your mother do when you were a little girl and you had an earache? She said, Mum would steam up an onion on a stove. So I ran home, I steamed up an onion on the stove, I wrapped it in a cloth, and when it just got to the right temperature, I put it on James' ear. He was breastfed, so I was feeding him to sleep with the onion on his ear, and he fell asleep. And when I laid him down, I laid him on a towel, folded over quite a few times, so that he laid on that onion, so it would keep it warm. And he slept for 2 hours. What does that tell you? He's not in pain. When he woke up, he was happy. In fact, I was watching him all day. He's happy. That's it. So no wonder I went into natural remedies. 6 weeks, 4 courses of antibiotics compared to 2-hour onion on the ear. That was quite incredible. In fact, James' father, whenever James cried, he'd say, "I'm sure it's that ear, I'm sure it's that ear. You didn't give him the antibiotics." So I took him to the doctor because I got pressure to do that. And the doctor looked in both ears, and the ear that had the earache was crystal clear, not even any swelling. Seems to be a bit of echo there, yeah, on that voice. Is that all right? That's better. And he said the ear that had the earache was crystal clear, no swelling at all, and the ear that didn't have the earache had a bit of wax in it. And that was my absolute confirmation that this onion did a good job. So what I did was I went down to the newsagent and I bought a little book that had A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That was my first natural remedies book. Went to the E for ears, onion. That was my first experience with a poultice. And I have had many feedbacks and also used it other times. That it seems to be that the heat of the onion brings great relief, and also the drawing of the onion. Now sometimes it'll make a hole and the pus will come out. Now if the body does that, it's nothing to fear. If the body makes a hole, it'll seal up that hole quickly. How else is the pus going to get out quickly? And often when that happens, then the person has great relief because the pain was the pressure on the other side of the eardrum. But other times, as it was with James, it appeared to just reduce the swelling and take, if there was pus there, it was taken away through the blood. So the body knows what to do. And if the body makes a hole, that's what it's chosen to do. Remember, the body knows what to do. And whenever you apply a natural remedy and the person gets relief, the body's actually saying, that's what I want. That's what I want. So you're always watching for the body's response. Another place that you can use the cooked onion is on a boil. And a man rang me and he had a boil on the inside of his nose. And I said, whoa. He said, it is so painful. He said, I've been getting a few lately. What can you do there? I said, well, we usually suggest putting a cooked onion on a boil, because I've had a few people tell me that that's brought great relief. You cook the onion and you cut it in half where you're looking at the rings. That's what you do for the earache, and it's also what you do for the boil. I didn't hear again for about 2 days later, and he rang me up. He said, it got so big, I woke up in the morning and the whole half of my face was swollen, so I quickly steamed an onion up, and a big one, and I just put it here. I covered it with a bit of plastic and then bandaged it onto my head, and he said it brought relief. But he said I kept it there for half the day. And he said, and when I took it off, everything came away. He said, I have never had a boil heal so quickly. So the onion just speeds it up. And I've also had people tell me that one lady had a boil on her back and her friend put the onion on. And she left it there, I think she left it there almost 24 hours. And because she had it covered in plastic and then bandaged it, it didn't chill or get cold. And she said when she left it there because it felt good. And then it was starting to feel moist, so she took it off and all the waste came out. So if all the waste doesn't come out, then you just do another onion poultice. So the body's response will guide you. So that's what you can do with the cooked onion. So we've looked at the cooked onion and the raw onion. I've also since learned something else you can do with the cooked onion. So ideally you steam it or you dry bake it, because if you boil it, some of the healing properties will go into the water. So ideally you either steam it or dry bake it. When you cut it in half, you can squeeze it, squeeze some juice into a teaspoon. Now that'll be boiling hot, but the teaspoon will be cold. So the hot drops onto the cold spoon will just bring it to a lukewarm temperature, and those cooked onion juice drops can be put straight into the ear. So that's another thing that you can do. So let's look at a little bit more that you can do back to the colds, and it's the flu bomb. But I want to open this up for all colds and flus. And this is the recipe, garlic. Now the garlic is either finely grated or crushed. How much garlic? How much can you stand? If I was giving it for a little one, I might do a tiny little clove. For me, I might do a huge clove. Some people can even handle 2 cloves. So I'll leave that one up to you. And ginger. And usually the ginger would be about 1/4 teaspoon. And that's finely grated. The third ingredient, and there's definitely a measurement for this, 1 drop. 1 drop of eucalyptus oil. One lady rang me up when she got this recipe and she said, Barbara, it says on the bottle, you cannot take it by mouth. I said, well, people have been taking 1 drop of eucalyptus oil in Australia for centuries. One lady, now I met her when I was 23 and she was in her 80s then. She said, when I was a little girl, I was one of 10 children, and if one person got a sniffle, we all had to line up, and Mum had put a few crystals of sugar on a spoon and a drop of eucalyptus oil, and we all had to have a dose. And she said, and none of the rest of us would get the cold. So I'm not suggesting half a cup. Yes, you might get very sick then, but we've got common sense, haven't we? So 1 drop. In Australia, you can buy eucalyptus oil lozenges, you know, in the pharmacy. Now, what's in the lozenge? It's sugar, but eucalyptus oil. So even though it says on the bottle, do not take by mouth, 1 drop, just 1 drop. If you don't have eucalyptus oil, you can use tea tree oil. Tea tree. Next one is cayenne pepper. I haven't got an amount on this because some people can handle a light sprinkle and some people can handle half a teaspoon. So it's whatever you can handle. The next ingredient is lemon. If you've got lemons falling off the tree, you might put the juice of 2 lemons. If lemons are $1 a lemon, you might put a squeeze. So as much as you can. So it's lemon juice. But usually it's the juice of a lemon and 1 teaspoon of honey. Now with that, you mix it into half a cup of hot water. And you drink it. And when you drink it, you don't have to chew up the garlic and the ginger, just drink it. Just throw it down. It's a lot easier if you just throw it down. And usually, if someone's got a bad cold or flu, it's 3 times a day. We had a very industrious staff member, I think it was last year. We had a lot of lemons, So I always suggest that the lemons are squeezed and pour into little ice cream, ice cube trays. And when they're frozen, they can be put out into a snap lock container. So you've got a freezer full of little squares of lemon juice. Well, she went one step further and decided to make a whole batch of flu bombs. And so every ice cube was equal to a flu bomb. So in our freezer we had bags and bags of flu bomb, ice cubes of flu bombs. And I said, oh. But it turned out to be handy because it's not uncommon when someone is going through a detox program that they might get a cold. They might start getting a runny nose. So whenever we see that, they could just about help themselves. They'll boil the kettle, you call it a kettle, electric jug, and they'd get an ice cube out, pour boiling water on it, and that's almost instant flu bomb, all ready to go. In the 1940s, Salisbury in England set up the Common Cold Research Unit to find the cause and the cure of the common cold. And what they would do is they would put people in hot baths and then put them out in wet clothes with a big wind. They wouldn't get a cold. So then they did the same thing, but they got the mucus out of someone's throat who already had a cold and put it in their throat, put them in a hot bath, put them out in the cold wind. They didn't get a cold. You see, you can't catch a cold. It all depends on the condition of the body. Have you found that? When a cold goes round, some get it and some don't. Because a cold is a house clean. So every time you blow your nose, every time you cough things up, praise God, it's getting the waste out of your body. So after 40 years, they closed down with a total failure to find the cause and the cure of the common cold. Because it is just a house clean. That's why 99% of people that get the strain of the common cold, they recover. My daughter has a son who's a paramedic. Do you know often a person will get a cold when they're ready for a house clean? He came home, he's 22, the whole family, bit by bit, also came down with it. They must have all been ready for a house clean. So my daughter put them in the steam bath twice a day. By her house, she's got a little hut with a little firebox. They built it for her. And I think probably at a stretch you can get about 8 people in there. It's got little wooden seats in there. And then outside she's got a big tub about that round, about that deep, and she fills it with cold water. So you go in the hot steam and then you come out and dive in the cold water. You're not usually in there for long. I was there 2 weeks ago and I was having them twice a day because she had a bit of a sniffle and went back into the steam bath. So she did that with her family twice a day. They had it. And they had a flu bomb, sometimes twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. 3 days and they're all better. See, when you give the body the right conditions, no matter what it is, the body will heal. So in some of our big hospitals, we should be having huge steam saunas, is that right? And did you know that 100 years ago that was so? I know in the San Hospital, which is a Seventh-day Adventist hospital in Sydney, the whole bottom floor of the hospital was this huge hydrotherapy unit where people could have contrast baths, steam saunas, all sorts of hydrotherapy. Well, unfortunately, it's been closed down and all the equipment's been taken away. See, it takes too much time. In that little book, Ministry of Healing, page 127, Ellen White says that the use of natural remedies requires an amount of care and effort that many aren't prepared to give. Isn't that true? And I was talking to a young man recently and he got a high temperature and he was very uncomfortable, and so he got a wet sheet pack and he sweated it out in that wet sheet pack, and he said it was the turning point. After that he started to heal. So remember, the body can heal itself no matter what it is. You've just got to give it the right conditions. So this flu bomb is a powerful one. Now, some people choose to have an antibiotic sandwich instead because this garlic is a powerful antibiotic. So let me draw for you the antibiotic sandwich. So ideally, we have a slice of bread. Now, the best bread is some sourdough, ancient grains, sourdough spelts or kamuts, ancient grains, and then you put about a very small teaspoon, if you can't handle that much, half a teaspoon of olive oil on top. And then you put a little sprinkle of cayenne pepper. We've got a bit of red here. Here's your cayenne pepper. And then on top of the cayenne pepper, we're going to put a bit of colour here. And some garlic is a bit purple, isn't it? And then you crush a whole clove of garlic on top of there. And then on top of that, you put slices of avocado. Here's the avocado. Nice big layer of avocado. That calms it right down. And then on top of all that, you put some slices of tomato. There's the tomato. And then on top of that, you put a nice sprinkling of the Celtic salt. There's your antibiotic sandwich. That's delicious. Yes, the cayenne pepper's hot and the garlic's hot, but the bread and the oil underneath and the avocado and tomato on top, they just calm it down. It's actually a taste sensation. So some people, maybe they've got to go to work and they've got a bit of a cold and they can't stop because they've got to eat. They'll have a couple of antibiotic sandwiches at breakfast and a couple of antibiotic sandwiches at lunch, and often in a couple of days they find that they have recovered. I've even found children were quite like that. So that's what you can do with garlic. What about children? What about babies? You can't give that to babies. How can you get garlic into babies? Well, there's this lady that told me about how her brothers and sisters all had to have the eucalyptus oil on a spoon when they all got a cold. She told me about this, and I've used it many times. Now remember the old sheets that you can cut up into strips? I cut a strip of fine cotton about that long. And then I put fine slices of garlic on that, depending on how big the little one's foot is. And then you pull this cloth over that and then wrap it on the foot. So the slices of garlic are wrapped to the bottom of the foot. But the garlic's not touching the foot because there's a layer of cloth between the garlic and the baby's foot. If the garlic touches the baby's foot, the skin will blister. That does not happen with the onion. Remember, the foot goes straight onto the onion. But with the garlic's very high in sulfur. And so with the garlic, you must put a layer there. And I've done it many times, just that thin layer of cloth between the garlic and the skin, it will not blister. So you wrap it onto the baby's foot, and then you put a little sock or a little bootie on, and in about 10 minutes you can smell the garlic on the baby's breath. The biggest pores in the whole of the body are on the soles of the feet. So just as you can't give a baby garlic, you can wrap the garlic on the bottom of the baby's feet, no matter what the age. And the blood will take the garlic up, and if there's a congested head, it'll help to clear that. If the chest is congested, it'll help to clear the chest. And I used to do it to my little James. He used to get a lot of coughs. He's my second child. And so I would slice the garlic and wrap it on the bottom of his feet, put his shoes and socks on. He's about 3, send him off to play. And every step he's taking, what's happening? A bit more garlic, a bit more garlic. bit more garlic. And then at the end of the day, when I took his shoes and socks off to give him a bath, the garlic was like bits of dried out yellow leather. Not a bit of moisture left in that garlic. It had all gone into James. So that's another very old remedy. I'm just very thankful to God that I was able to get some of these remedies from these ladies. And at the moment, I have my second book being edited, and it's a handbook on natural remedies. So it has all of these natural remedies listed in them. So we're hoping that that'll be in print early next year.